Authorities blame poor road conditions for a bus crash in Sweden.
Emergency services say 30 people, including teenagers, end up in the hospital for treatment. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Ricky Mathay.
And I am Nina Richie Elagao Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines. Philippines joins UN's demand for Russia to cease conflict with Ukraine. Senate proudly delivers RCEP agreement to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Leaders around the world reaffirm support to Ukraine. Chinese President Xi Jinping urges Russia and Ukraine to hold peace talks. And a Kremlin envoy asserts the West has rebuffed Russia's proposed security deal. One 141 countries, including the Philippines, has called on Russia to leave Ukraine. A year after Moscow's campaign to seize Kyiv, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution calling for the end of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This reaffirms support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. 32 countries abstained in the resolution, while 7 countries rejected its adoption. These include Belarus, North Korea, Eritrea, Mali, Nicaragua, Russia, and Syria. Philippines' move is in accordance to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s declaration that the country is for a peaceful resolution of the conflict in Ukraine. This month, President Marcos Jr. was able to have a telephone conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where they discussed the deep bilateral relationships between the Philippines and Ukraine. Zelensky also thanked President Marcos for keeping its position with Ukraine.
The Senate is proud to present the ratified Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or RCEP, to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The President has said RCEP's swift ratification shows that the Philippines is committed to openness and a thriving business environment. Mian Corvera tells us more.
The Senate will send a copy of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement to Malacanang. Earlier, Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri signed the resolution, which was first ratified by the Senate. The Senate has said there is nothing wrong with the trade agreement because it will benefit the Philippines significantly. According to Senator Loren Legarda, in addition to economic growth, poverty incidence is expected to be reduced to 3.4%.
According to studies conducted, and one is by Dr. Cororota, by 2031, there will be an increase in GDP, real GDP, by almost 2%, 1.93%. Hindi natin matatawaran ang 2% na pag-akyat ng gross domestic product. And reduction, pagbaba, ng consumer price index by almost 0.5%, 0.48%, and increase in factor prices for skilled wages by 1.61%.
Zubiri opposed critics who said the trade agreement was rushed. The senator said all lawmakers were consulted and the Senate also obtained the position of the groups opposed to the agreement. Zubiri insists the country needs the RCEP to advance the country's economy, which has been severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
We have to join the largest trading group to avail of all the benefits for our people. And I stand by my vote. I stand by my position that this will be able to be a springboard for our country as a major trading hub in the region.
The Department of Trade and Industry said it expects to begin exporting and importing products to RCEP member countries after 3 months. Some of the industries that will benefit from these are manufacturers of canned tuna and electronic products. Legarda was appointed head of the established oversight committee to oversee the implementation of the RCEP that assured that they will listen to the cries of all sectors concerned about the implementation of the RCEP. The Senate also provided that the agreement could be withdrawn if the Philippines becomes dumping site of products or if the country is defrauded.
Mukhang dehado tayo and there's an influx of goods from all over, then definitely a review will be in place. Will be in place and will be in order. And that we can recommend to the President if need be.
First, yes, that's a provision, but even we go to as far as that provision, there are safeguard measures already in the agreement. Available trade remedies, should there be a surge, let's say, in imports or unfair trade practices in the implementation of the RCEP agreement. Whatever we entered into previous to RCEP, it stays there, nandiyan. So there's also a RCEP safeguard measure.
Mayan Corvera for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, is confident that the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership and Recovery will strengthen the small business sector in the country. The DTI encourages investors and other big companies around the world to start a business in the Philippines. Vin Pascua has the details.
The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership will accelerate the Philippines' recovery efforts when it comes to our economy. This is the statement of the Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI. In a statement, Trade Secretary Alfredo Pascual said, "It's good that the country will invest to regain occupations that are expected to help create more jobs." The minister also said that the micro, small, and medium enterprises sector will be strengthened and will be able to supply more businesses in the country. The official assured that it will attract investors and other big companies around the world to build their own business. The DTI is currently working on the paperwork, including the certificate of ratification, within 30 days. Meanwhile, the country's membership on RCEP will be effective after 60 days. The Senate ratified the RCEP on February 21st. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
House Speaker Martin Romualdez assures the public that the proposed Maharlika Investment Fund, or MIF, will not be abused. In his speech before the Asia CEO Forum, Romualdez says the proposed sovereign fund has a layer of protection and safety measures. These include the 3 layers of auditing from internal and external auditors, as well as the Commission on Audit, or COA. Apart from the 3 auditing layers, a Congressional Oversight Committee will be created to monitor and supervise the MIF. Romualdez says the MIF will help economic recovery of the country, which will benefit the Filipino people.
The Maharlika Bill, as envisioned in House Bill number 6608, lessens the need for government to go through these traditional modes by creating an alternative system through which funds for national development projects may be generated in an efficient and sustainable manner at that.
The National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, says the flagship projects of the Marcos administration will be finalized by next month. Nadine Aguilar files this report.
The government is finalizing the list of 15 trillion pesos worth of flagship projects that are set to be approved by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. next month. This is confirmed by the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA. NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan said the cabinet level of the Investment Coordination Committee will meet this week to set the priority projects of the current administration. Balisacan said that once the ICC reviews the list, it will be discussed by the NEDA Board Executive Committee chaired by the President on March 9. He said the funds will be used for 3,700 projects, including 190 programs under the Public-Private Partnership Scheme and 98 pipeline projects worth 3 trillion pesos. The NEDA Secretary added that the list includes pending projects of the previous administration. The 3,700 projects are an addition to the 7 infrastructure projects previously approved by the President on February 13th. President Marcos has approved 4 projects to be funded through official development assistance loans totaling 117 billion pesos. Meanwhile, Balisacan said that not all projects will be approved immediately. Nadine Aguilar, for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Recent talks between the Department of Justice and European parliamentarians centered on Philippine justice and judicial system reforms. Paulo Ramos tells us more.
In a dialogue between European parliamentarians and officials of the Department of Justice, the discussion on the International Criminal Court's probe on the country's war on drugs was brief. Justice Secretary Crispin Remulla says talks on the issue took less than 3 minutes.
Ang sabi ko lang doon, inaayos na rin namin ang sistema. Kung may problema talaga ang ICC na gusto imbestigahan dito, ibigay na lang sa amin, kami na ang gagawa. Kasi yan, these are crimes committed in the Philippines by Filipinos.
Instead, EU delegates focused on the reforms implemented by the DOJ and judiciary system. According to the Secretary, the EU lawmakers seem surprised by the changes and improvements implemented by the Marcos government.
Maganda naman yung nangyayari sa amin. Maganda naman yung dialogue namin. Nakita nila yung reforms na undertake ng Department of Justice. Parang gulat sila, pero alam nila na nabalitaan nila yung mga ginagawa natin dati. Na-affirm lang sa kanila na yung ating ginagawa para sa ating judicial system, sa ating justice system, ay nakakatulong talaga sa karapatang pantao.
The meeting also discussed reforms to the prison system and the prosecution of cases. The changes to the Philippine correction system, such as the decongestion of prisons, will be Remulla's main focus when he heads to Geneva next week. The Secretary estimates that prison population could be reduced by more than 10% within the first year of government implementation measures.
Ang tingin namin, detention prisoners will go down to from 200,000 to 50,000 within 3 years. Dahil mas efficient tayo.
Paulo Ramos for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The deadline for submission of the Alien Certificate of Registration Identity Cards, or ACRI cards, is on Wednesday, March the 1st. The Bureau of Immigration made the announcement as it reminded foreigners working and residing in the Philippines to submit their annual reports. Immigration spokesperson Dana Sandoval says the concerned foreigners should not wait for the deadline to avoid any hassle. The BI has also designated various satellite offices to accommodate and process foreign nationals' ACRI cards. They can also set their appointments online. Concerned foreigners who will fail to report or submit their requirements can also send representatives to immigration offices with their respective authorization letters.
The Department of Health opposes to remove marijuana or cannabis on the list of illegal drugs. DOH Chief of Hospital Dr. Jose Bienvenido Liabres explains that marijuana use has a long impact on humans. The expert adds that an individual who uses the drug is at a higher risk of psychosis, depression, and anxiety disorders. He notes that an individual who is high or drunk with the use of marijuana is prone to accidents due to poor coordination and poor concentration. The official insists that the public could be put at risk if the use of the illegal drug was not avoided.
After the mixed price adjustments on Tuesday, the price of petroleum products is expected to go down next week. Based on the 4-day trade movement, it is possible the price of diesel will be reduced by 1 peso and 86 centavos per liter, 1 peso and 2 centavos for gasoline, and 1 peso and 90 centavos for kerosene. Meanwhile, a big-time rollback in liquefied petroleum gas is expected to come in March. The price of LPG may be reduced by 5 to 6 pesos per kilogram. This is after the world market's metric ton of LPG fell to $90 US. However, the final price of oil products and LPG will be announced on Monday as the trading days are not yet over.
The northeast monsoon is still affecting Luzon this Friday, February 24. According to Pag-asa, the northern winds will bring cloudy skies with rains to Cagayan Valley, Apayao, Kalinga, Mountain Province, and Ifugao. Meanwhile, Palawan, Visayas, and Mindanao will be partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers and thunderstorms caused by localized thunderstorms. Here in Metro Manila and the rest of Luzon, it will be slightly cloudy with light rainfall caused by the northeast monsoon. Coming up, 30 people are injured in Sweden during 3 bus crashes. The U.S. will impose sweeping actions on Russia over Ukraine war. And a human rights group claims Pyongyang's nuclear test site carries radiation. Mata ng Agila International will be back after a short break.
Sa Baguio. Pero ramdam na ramdam namin ang init ng inyong suporta sa naganap na Let's Net Together Baguio. Maraming salamat mga ka-Net25 sa masayang pagsalubong sa mga paborito nyong Net25 stars.
Baguio! Kamusta kayo naman? Malapakan!
Maki-Net Together sa sayawan. Maki-Net Together sa kantahan. At Maki-Net Together sa kasiyahan.
Not again!
Watch Let's Net Together Baguio ngayong February 25, 2023, 9 p.m. dito sa Net25. Net25 with...
Ganyan mo siguro, hindi ka pa nakaka-move on kay Ate Juliet, no?
Kahit sino pang lalaki manligaw sa kanya, okay na ako.
Yung unang babae, si Annette yun. Yung pangalawang babae naman, si Johnny yun. Gusto kong humingi ng payo sa inyong dalawa. Gets nyo ba?
Sino na may kausap mo?
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Poor road conditions are being blamed for a bus crash in central Sweden Thursday that sent 30 people to a hospital. 3 buses had been transporting high school students and teachers to a ski resort when they ran into each other. The injured were taken away to hospitals in 3 ambulances. Local media reports some of the injured are in serious condition. The buses had been carrying more than 100 students. Rescue crews had trouble reaching the scene because of the weather. The buses had been en route to a resort some 200 kilometers north of Stockholm. The road was closed for several hours while crews cleared the wreckage.
Ukrainians addressed the anniversary of Russia's invasion with a mix of hope, sadness, anxiety, and resolution. The war that began last year has killed thousands of soldiers and civilians. It has displaced millions of people and reduced cities to debris. The conflict also fueled food shortages and hiked oil prices all over the world. Analysts fear the Moscow and Kyiv confrontation could open a conflict between Russia and NATO. Here's a recap of some key moments. Russian Putin launched a special military operation in Ukraine on February 24. He says he will liberate and demilitarize Ukraine to protect ethnic Russians, prevent Kyiv's NATO membership, and keep it in Russia's sphere of influence. The West and Ukraine slammed Putin's actions, saying it's an illegal act of aggression against the country. On March 2, Russia claimed control of the southern city of Kherson. Moscow troops also occupy the Zaporizhia region, including Europe's largest nuclear power plant. On May 16, Ukrainian defenders of the giant Azovstal steel mill agreed to surrender to Russian forces. The West and its allies sent weapons to Ukraine. Russia pulled back from Snake Island. Russia and Ukraine, with mediation by Turkey and UN, agreed on a deal to unblock supplies of grain stuck in Black Sea ports. On August 9, powerful explosions struck an air base in Crimea. On September 21, Putin ordered the mobilization of 300,000 reservists. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the United States on December 21st to secure Patriot air defense missile systems from U.S. President Joe Biden. Last month, Russia unleashed another wave of strikes on Ukraine's energy facilities. Today, as the conflict concludes its first year, there is no end in sight. Putin says they will continue fighting for Russia's right to history. On the other hand, Zelensky declares they will not be defeated. He even vowed to do everything to gain victory this year.
It's been a year since Moscow launched its special military operations in Kyiv. Leaders from the United Kingdom, Germany, and Italy share concerns about the Russia and Ukraine conflict. King Charles III lashes out at Russia's unprovoked full-scale attack on Ukraine. On Twitter, the British monarch says Ukrainian people have suffered from Russia's acts. He also declares the world stands united with Ukraine. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier echoes UK statements and says Russia keeps throwing new troops to the front line. He asserts Moscow is prolonging the war and not the West. Meanwhile, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni declares that Rome has no intention of weakening in its support for Kyiv. She also vows to defend freedom and democracy in Ukraine.
China urges Russia and Ukraine to resume peace talks as it released its 12-point plans to end the conflict in Kyiv.
乌克兰问题有着复杂的历史经纬，中方在乌克兰问题上一贯秉持客观公正立场，积极劝和促谈，按照事情本身的是非曲直决定自身立场，始终坚定站在和平一边，站在对话一边，站在历史正确的一边。中方愿在关于政治解决乌克兰危机的中国立场文件基础上，同国际社会一道，继续为推动乌克兰危机的政治解决做出自己的贡献。
Beijing's new position insists dialogue and negotiation are the only viable solutions between the parties. The paper also insists the international community should stay committed to the right approach to promoting talks for peace. Xi Jinping's government asserts nations must help Russia and Ukraine open the door to a political settlement as soon as possible. China also opposes the threat and use of atomic weapons, chemical and biological weapons by any country under any circumstances. Beijing further calls on all parties to oppose using the world economy as a tool or weapon for political purposes. However, the United States quickly criticized China's political settlement paper. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan asserts the war could end tomorrow if Russia stopped attacking Ukraine and withdrew its forces. Ukrainian and EU diplomats also urged China to do more to pressure Russia to end the conflict.
China should do everything in its power to stop the war and restore peace in Ukraine and urge Russia to withdraw its troops. And then, in my opinion, if it is neutrality, then China should talk to both sides, Russia and Ukraine. And now we see that Chinese side mostly talk to Russian, but not with Ukraine.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says sanctions are hurting Russia. Her comment comes as she and other G7 finance chiefs meet to discuss further measures against Moscow. And Yellen says Russia President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine has been anything but successful.
1 year later, Putin's war has been a strategic failure for the Kremlin. Ukraine still stands, and NATO and our global coalition stand united behind it.
Yellen says export controls are making it extremely difficult for Russia to replenish and repair its weaponry.
The White House says the United States will announce sweeping new sanctions against Russia. This a year after President Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine. On the eve of the anniversary of the war's onset, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre warns that the U.S. will punish key sectors that generate revenue for Putin.
Among other announcements, the United States will implement sweeping sanctions against key sectors that generate revenue for Putin, go after more Russian banks, Russia's defense and technology industry, and actors in third-party countries that are attempting to backfill and evade our sanctions.
Russian ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, reveals that Moscow has made security guarantees on the eve of the Ukrainian crisis. However, Nebenzia says the West arrogantly rejected all of their proposals.
We are seeing events in European capitals and institutions focused on how best to dismember and destroy our country. It was Russia, on the eve of the Ukrainian crisis, which consistently proposed to the West to sign agreements on mutual security guarantees. All of them were arrogantly rejected. As a result, the world is now teetering on the brink of a suicidal conflict, which the EU, together with the rest of the West, is moving towards by stepping up arms supplies to the Kiev regime and increasing its involvement. It is claimed that NATO and the EU will use all political, economic and military means in the interests of their 1 billion citizens. The rest of the world is seen as a hostile environment that must be reformatted with these very tools.
An Azov fighter admits to killing civilians in Mariupol. He details how he and his colleagues set fire to people in houses. He says he is responsible for executing people they did not like due to fictitious reasons. Here's an exclusive interview from RT News.
Какие-то гражданские объекты занимались в целях обороны?
Гражданские объекты занимали.
Какие?
Это были жилые дома.
В жилых домах в это время находился кто-то из гражданских?
Пятиэтажные. В самих помещениях, там, где мы были, нет, в подвале помещения надо было.
То есть вы занимали гражданские дома, в подвальных помещениях которых находилось гражданское население?
Гражданское.
Пряталось?
Точно. Спортивная школа номер 5, после того, как нас вывел туда противник, и было принято решение, что нужно это здание будет поджечь. Мы все здания не проверяли и не следили за тем, как гражданские туда выходят, потому что думали, предполагали, что там может находиться противник. Примерно 6-7 апреля 2022 года я вместе с 4 бойцами по отказу ПСИХ, Яна, Швейк и Зумер остановили мужчин примерно 40 лет в ходе обыска ношения спички с русского сухпая, после чего я отвел его в трехэтажное недостроенное здание, где произвел 3 выстрела в корпус, после 2 выстрела в голову, после чего мужчина не подавал признаки жизни.
North Korea has test-fired 4 strategic cruise missiles into the sea, adding that the drill demonstrated the conflict readiness of Pyongyang's nuclear combat force. It was the latest in a series of provocative weapons tests that have sent tensions soaring on the Korean peninsula. The 4 Wasal-2 missiles were fired from the area of Kimchek-sik, or city, in northern Hamgyong province towards the East Sea, also known as the Sea of Japan. The Korean Central News Agency stated they traveled 2,000 kilometers before precisely hitting their target, without specifying what the targets were. KCNA states the Central Military Commission of the Workers' Party of Korea expressed great satisfaction over the results of the launching drill. Pyongyang rejected condemnation by the United Nations chief of its recent ballistic missile launches, saying it was unfair and unbalanced and ignored the North's right to self-defense. The reclusive North Korean state also test-fired dozens of missiles in 2022, setting security postures in East Asia on edge.
A Seoul-based human rights group alleges thousands of people in South Korea, China, Japan, and North Korea could be exposed to radioactive materials from an underground nuclear test site. Washington and Seoul claim Pyongyang secretly conducted 6 tests of nuclear weapons at the Pyongyeri site in North Hamgyong province since or between 2006 and 2017. The Transitional Justice Working Group claims radioactive materials could have spread across 8 cities and counties near the site where groundwater is used in everyday lives, including for drinking. South Korean food safety officials also say they detected 9 times the normal levels of radioactive isotopes in imported hedgehog mushrooms that turned out to have been smuggled from North Korea. Seoul's Unification Ministry reports that 9 out of 40 defectors from the regions near Pyongyeri tested for radiation in 2017 and 2018 showed abnormalities. Sources say outside experts have raised concerns over potential health risks from contaminated water. Yet North Korea rejected such concerns, arguing there were no leaks of harmful materials from the nuclear tests.
A Cold War bunker on the outskirts of Canada's capital is drawing much attention. Christine McGuire, the executive director of the bunker-turned-museum, says when the war in Ukraine started, they received a lot of questions from the public. People are asking whether the museum still functions as a fallout shelter. McGuire says that fear of nuclear war is still very real.
Very real. The anxieties are coming back. We're seeing remnants of the Cold War with these global tensions. So right now we're in the CBC radio room. So this is the room that emergency communications would have went across the country during a nuclear attack. And we have an example here.
It's another emergency broadcast by the Canadian Emergency Broadcasting System. This is another emergency broadcast by the Canadian Emergency Broadcasting System.
Museum volunteer Graham Wheatley also notices the increased interest in the bunker.
Oh, people are really interested. It's a unique piece of Canadian history. A lot of people don't know about it. And of course, with the war in Ukraine and the nuclear threats that are going from Putin, people are sort of like, would this become operational again? You know, do we have anything else like this? So those are the type of questions you get asked.
What is your answer to that?
Up next, Palestinian Authority faces backlash over UN resolution withdrawal. South Africa records its first cholera death in a decade. And U.S. Transportation Secretary apologizes for muted response to Ohio train derailment. Stay tuned. Mata ng Agila International will be back after this short break.
Sa Baguio. Pero ramdam na ramdam namin ang init ng inyong suporta sa naganap na Let's Net Together Baguio. Maraming salamat mga ka-Net25 sa masayang pagsalubong sa mga paborito nyong Net25 stars.
Baguio! Kamusta kayo naman? Malapakan!
Maki-Net Together sa sayawan. Maki-Net Together sa kantahan. At Maki-Net Together sa kasiyahan.
Not a game!
Watch Let's Net Together Baguio ngayong February 25, 2023, 9 p.m. dito sa Net25. Net25.
Mga ka-PSL, ako di ay si Gab Dagangon ng Davao Occidental Tigers. Para sa mainit action, sa hardcourt, tutok lang sa Pilipinas Super League. Ito ang liga ko.
Let's get together sa Net25.
The Palestinian Authority, or PA, is facing backlash over its decision to drop a draft resolution urging the United Nations Security Council to condemn Israel's illegal settlement activity. Reports say the United States presented the PA with incentives. These include a financial aid package, temporary suspension of new Israeli settlement units, and Palestinian home demolitions. A White House meeting for PA President Mahmoud Abbas with U.S. President Joe Biden, and a movement on reopening the American consulate in Jerusalem. Opposition political parties are angered by the PA's acceptance of U.S. promises in exchange for retracting its position. The PA has not addressed the reports, but a vote on the resolution was meant to take place on Monday.
Burkina Faso announced Thursday a recruitment drive for 5,000 soldiers to serve in the army for at least 5 years. This will aid the country in its fight against jihadists. The recruitment of young male soldiers will be from February 28 to March 7. The ministry says enlistees must have been born between January 1, 1988 and December 31, 2003. This is the third time in less than a year that the Burkinabe Army has organized such a drive. In April 2022, 3,000 soldiers were recruited, with the process launched again in October. Burkina Faso has been rocked by two coups since the start of the year, with each new leader accusing the previous of having failed to quell the violence. In 7 years, more than 1,000 civilians have been killed together with some soldiers, according to NGOs, and some 2 million people internally displaced.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for the reform of global lenders like the World Bank at the G20 finance meeting. Ministers and central banks convene in Bengaluru to discuss the continuing effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine war. Modi says though the world population has crossed 8 billion, progress on sustainable development goals appears to be slowing down.
It is now up to you, the custodians of the leading economies and monetary systems of the world, to bring back stability, confidence, and growth to the global economy. Even as the world population has crossed 8 billion, progress on sustainable development goals seems to be slowing down. We need to collectively work to strengthen multilateral development banks for meeting global challenges like climate change and high debt levels.
South African health authorities announced its first cholera death case in a decade. Cholera is not endemic in South Africa. The country recorded 5 cases since February. Health Minister Joe Paala states that the victim showed no reports of leaving the country and died in a hospital on Sunday. Lab results verified that he had cholera. The United Nations reports that at least 1,004 people, or that's 400 people, have died from the disease out of almost 45,000 cases in Malawi since March of last year. Neighboring countries, Mozambique, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, have also recently registered cases. World Health Organization Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says there are 23 other countries suffering from cholera outbreaks, endangering another 20 nations that share land borders with them.
UK shoppers are disappointed to see empty shelves at supermarkets. Fresh fruits and vegetables are hard to come by. Supermarkets are having trouble getting produce because of weather conditions in southern Europe and North Africa. Stores that manage to obtain these items are putting limits on how much customers can buy. Growers and suppliers in Morocco say cold temperatures, heavy rain, and flooding have affected their crops. The bad weather has also affected farmers in southern Spain. That's because ferries have been canceled, making it difficult for growers to get their crops to market. Tomatoes and peppers seem to be in the shortest supply. Supermarkets expect the disruption to last for a few weeks.
As a concerning number of students in the U.S. experience depression and sadness, the Education Department reaches out to schools to grant additional funding to mental health services. Rosel Feria tells us more.
The U.S. Education Department announces awards of over $188 million across 170 grantees in over 30 states to increase access to school-based mental health services. The grants also aim to strengthen the pipeline of mental health professionals in high-needs districts. The Department of Education says these grants will equip communities in hiring 5,400 school-based mental health professionals. They are also meant to train an estimated 5,500 more to build a diverse pipeline of mental health providers in schools. These investments aim to broaden access to critical mental health supports by increasing the number of healthcare providers within the schools. These competitive grants are the first in a series of awards the department will make over several years. The grants are the largest investment in school-based mental health the U.S. has ever made. A recent CDC report reveals that in 2021, more than 4 in 10 high school students in the country felt persistently sad or hopeless, and nearly a third experienced poor mental health. In the same year, 1 in 5 students seriously considered attempting suicide, and 1 in 10 attempted suicide. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Rosel Feria for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The U.S. government says that more than 500,000 Filipinos are considered as U.S. military veterans. It says about 50,000 are living in the Philippines. There is good news for U.S. veterans eligible for disability benefits. In Washington, D.C., Jeff Sanidad has the details.
United States veterans can now access their disability benefit claim decision notice letters electronically. Disability decisions may be accessed quickly and easily on va.gov. Before making this option available, veterans had to wait for a paper copy of their decision notice to be mailed to them. Since launching on January 17th, nearly 280,000 decision notice letters have already been downloaded. Secretary Dennis McDonough says veterans now have access to their benefits decisions anytime and any place, right at their fingertips. He says these can also open the door to other federal and state benefits. Quick and easy access to a decision means a quicker access to the additional benefits veterans deserve. The new electronic option is also expected to reduce calls to the national call centers. It frees up call center respondents to answer other questions and requests from veterans and their families. To access their decision letters, veterans can log in to va.gov. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jeff Sanidad for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Unlike conventional treatments like chemotherapy or radiotherapy, which target the tumor itself, immunotherapy stimulates the patient's immune response. Cancer cells neutralize the immune system's defenses, allowing cancerous cells to multiply in the body. Immunotherapy uses various tools like vaccination. Targeted antibody therapies in which proteins in the immune system are capable of recognizing or recognizing undesirable cells eliminate them. And immunomodulators, substances that stimulate the immune response. Another strategy uses cell therapy. A sample of white cells known as lymphocytes are taken from the patient before being genetically modified to enable them to recognize cancer cells. These super lymphocytes are then re-injected into the body to attack the cancer. Used today to treat blood cancer and inoperable or advanced stage cancers, these therapies have raised hopes for the treatment of other types of cancer. However, immunotherapy only works for a minority of patients. It can also have serious side effects, such as autoimmune reactions by the body to healthy cells.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg apologizes for his muted response to a toxic train derailment. As he visited the scene on Thursday, he pushed railways to implement safety reforms. The train went off the rails 3 weeks ago in the Ohio village of East Palestine because of an overheated wheel bearing. Since then, toxic fumes have filled the air. There are fears some of the leaking chemicals that were being transported have fouled the region's water supply. Buttigieg says he stayed away because he did not want to be seen as interfering in the Transportation Safety Board investigation. After being criticized for his lack of response, Buttigieg admits he should have weighed in about what he felt was happening in the community. In the days following the accident, Norfolk Southern Rail conducted a controlled release of toxic vinyl chloride from several smoldering cars. Buttigieg urges railways not to wait on federal legislation and to begin beefing up safety measures now.
The usually balmy Southern California is under a first blizzard warning since 1989. The icy weather front stretches along the entire U.S. West Coast, including the Canadian province of British Columbia. The National Weather Service, or NWS, says the winter storm warning is in effect for the coastal Ventura and Los Angeles County mountains from early Friday until Saturday. Forecasters also predict a record snowfall of up to 5 feet in the mountains around the city of Santa Barbara. The NWS also warns the heavy snow will be accompanied by high winds and near zero visibility. Coming right up, Russia launches empty ship to ISS to replace damaged capsule.
Turbo pumps at flight speed and
NBA superstar Carmelo Anthony appointed as 2023 FIBA World Cup Global Ambassador. And Taiwan to pay tourists for vacation. Catch more news when Mata ng Agila International returns. Still remains a rare venue of cooperation between Russia and the United States since the start of the Moscow and Kyiv conflict. In fact, an uncrewed Russian Soyuz capsule took off early Friday from Kazakhstan for the International Space Station, or ISS. Their mission is to replace a capsule damaged by a tiny meteoroid. U.S. astronaut Frank Rubio and Russian cosmonauts Dmitry Petelin and Sergei Prokofiev began leaking coolant on December 14. The damage raised fears that there could be problems during re-entry when the capsule experiences extreme temperatures. The Soyuz MS-23 vessel is scheduled to dock on the ISS early Sunday, Moscow time.
Structural parameters are reported to be normal. The engines
FIBA has appointed NBA superstar Carmelo Anthony to be its global ambassador for the 2023 FIBA World Cup. According to Melo, he is promoting stronger ties between nations through basketball. Aside from Anthony, FIBA also selected well-known players Luis Scola and Pau Gasol to be ambassadors. Melo was pleased that this time, they will not compete in court. Melo shared his personal observations of the international game and the style of the game on the world stage. In the meantime, the group of fans waited patiently to see their idol. No matter where the fans of Melo came from, they gathered here at the Araneta Coliseum to fulfill the dream of seeing him. Melo's fans are eagerly awaiting his appointment as third.
More than 100 golfers face off to represent the Philippines in the 2023 World Amateur Golfers Championship. Vin Pascua has the details.
The 2023 World Amateur Golfers Championship inaugural golf tournament was a success. The tournament took place at Alabang Country Club where more than 100 players joined to enter the national competition. 6 champions from Division A to F were presented. John Barron won for Division A, Joseph Maganduga for Division B, Princess Joy Park for Division C, Jay Pingol for Division D, Gilbert Magbutay for Division E, and Eduardo Cabanatan Jr. for Division F.
This is the beginning of our journey to Phuket. We are looking for amateur players who will join the National Finals Championship at the World Amateur Golf in Phuket, Thailand. So we started it here at Alabang Country Club. The Division A to F champions and runner-ups will join the National Finals on September.
The World Amateur Golfers Championship, or WAGC, is a global golf tournament composed of golfers from different countries and around the world. It is held annually and was founded in 1995 in Durban, South Africa. Fans of the competition say the Philippines is always on track and has a big chance of bagging the championship this year.
WAGC is the largest amateur golf tournament in the world. It's held in over 45 different countries. And in the Philippines in particular, we host over 20 to 30 golf tournaments a year. The participants of our qualifier, they compete to win a chance to make it to the national finals, where they battle it out to go to the world finals, where they'll compete with all the other countries from all over the world. Our expectations every year is to win the overall competition. Every year the Philippines does pretty well in the world finals. And in fact, in 2019, we took second place. So hopefully this year we can surpass that.
I am Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
For the long weekend, you can de-stress and cozy up to a movie or two. Stephanie Mayo has some recommendations. Take a look.
In the mood for award-winning drama? Well, you won't be disappointed. Here are a couple of critically acclaimed films that you can watch this weekend. The Whale. Brendan Fraser received an Oscar nomination for Best Actor in Darren Aronofsky's psychological drama, which is now showing in select Philippine theaters. This is the actor's comeback and his first major role since 2013. This is also the first Oscar nomination for Fraser, who in this movie plays a morbidly obese and isolated English teacher who attempts to reconnect with his estranged daughter. The movie earned a 6-minute standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival. Decision to Leave. Earning rave reviews from international critics, this South Korean romantic mystery won Park Chan-wook the Best Director Award at the 2022 Cannes Film Festival. It was also shortlisted for the Best International Feature Film category at this year's Academy Awards. The restrained drama follows a sleep-deprived detective who is investigating a man's death but ends up falling in love with a dead man's wife, who also happens to be the prime suspect. Stream it on Netflix. Stephanie Mayo for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Lawmakers urged the Movie, Television Review and Classification Board to expand its jurisdiction to include streaming platforms. They say it is for the protection of minors. Celine Dorado tells us more.
Senators want to expand the authority of the Movie, Television Review and Classification Board, or MTRCB, to include monitoring online streaming platforms. According to Senator Grace Poe, online content needs to be age-appropriate, especially for minors. She also says that the streaming services should obtain legislative franchises before they can operate in the country, similar to cable and broadcast companies. Currently, MTRCB can only request a few online platforms like Netflix to self-regulate, but the agency has no control for other online platforms. Meanwhile, Senator Bong Revilla states that the scope of regulation must be clear. Senator Robin Padilla, chairman of the Senate Committee on Information and Mass Media, says that it is urgent to create a law about these concerns. He notes that it is disturbing that children have access to many online platforms, especially those that are free. He adds most content on online platforms are rude and inappropriate for children. Celine Dorado for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
As travel returns, destinations are doing all they can to encourage visitors to come and boost their economies, and Taiwan is the latest. The country is planning to offer tourists $165 each to vacation there. Cash rewards will also be offered to tour groups to encourage them to visit the island. Transport Minister Wang Kuo-tsai stated Wednesday that the cash allowance will be delivered digitally. They will give handouts of 5,000 new Taiwan dollars to 500,000 individual tourists. Allowances of up to 20,000 new Taiwan dollars will also be provided to 90,000 tour groups. Tourists will be able to use the cash incentive to cover their expenses in Taiwan, including accommodations. However, the government has yet to announce when the scheme will start or how to apply for the allowance.
And to help you start this weekend, here's a quote from Havelock Ellis, an English physician and writer. All the art of living lies in a fine mingling of letting go and holding on.
And as an artist, that is a difficult decision for me to make.
Is it hard for you to edit out or curate when you do your art and your painting?
It's more for the part that it's hard to part with some pieces.
Oh, with some pieces.
Yeah, because sometimes you fall in love with the process.
Of course, and it's your baby.
Exactly.
Well, one of these days, I will have one of Nina Alagao Flores' pieces, art pieces.
That puts a lot of pressure on me.
But anyway, happy weekend, everybody. Happy weekend,
yes.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media platforms and channels. I am Ricky Matay.
And I am Nina Richie Alagao Flores, wishing everyone a happy weekend. This is Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.